What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and in today's video we are continuing our Animal Chess opening series by covering the Hawk variation, a fascinating choice against the move of d4. Now, the Hawk starts out with c5, going with the old Benoni defense, and now against the main line of d5, we're playing knight f6. There's a lot of different things White can do here, including the move of c4, which is seen quite a bit against c4. My favorite option personally is probably the Benko Gambit with b5, but okay, let's say here White plays that move of knight f3, the second most popular choice at the master and grandmaster level in over-the-board chess. We now have this option of c4, right, going into the Hawk variation game. And let me just be blunt with you guys. I'm not a big fan of this move. Now, first off, what good does it do? Well, this pawn is simply gaining a ton of space, right? We're attacking squares like d3 and b3. But what I don't like about the move is that this pawn is kind of just flying away by itself. And White can attack it pretty easily with a move like e3. And notice it's, like I just said, right? It's kind of by itself. This pawn is flying away like a hawk, not a lot of support. None of our minor pieces are going to be able to defend anytime soon. If we play something against e3 like queen c7, White could even think about knight a3, right? Double attacking that pawn and even looking at that square of b5, right? So really the main idea of c4 is not to play queen c7, but instead to play queen a5, giving White a check sometimes, supporting a b5 push, which by the way supports c4, followed by b4, gaining quick space on the queen side of the board and playing for a space advantage overall, right? So that's really the idea of the Hawk variation. We're playing aggressively, we're getting after it. All that being said, though, if White knows what they're doing, they're going to be more than okay. And we're going to cover what to do against the Hawk variation at the end of this video, just in case you're a d4 player and you're trying to figure out what to do. But let's cover some popular responses that we see in online chess, right? These include moves like e3 and knight c3. Let's first take a look at the move of e3, which, by the way, I don't think is the best move. In this case, Black, as said, right, we're going to play queen a5 with check. And, okay, I mean, I think here the main move that you're going to see is knight c3. If you see something like bishop d2, I mean, we can always just take the pawn off, right? Queen d2, it may seem as if White is giving up a pawn, and I guess they are for a moment, but then, of course, they just win the pawn right back, right? So, okay, at this point, we move our knight back. But okay, at this point, e6, I mean, at that point, we're looking to play something like d5, a6, develop our pieces. Black there with a pretty comfortable game. If White tries to slow this down with something like e4, we could even bring our bishop out in Owen's defense type fashion, right? Pinning this knight on c3 to the king and looking to win this pawn on e4. So, okay, let's say White plays the computer recommended move of bishop d3. We now advance in the center with d5, putting even more pressure on e4, and Black here with a pretty much even game. Right, so this is good. I mean, this is a good result. Move 10, an even evaluation, just about even, maybe a slight advantage for White. But all that being said, this is a good line for Black. So going back to queen a5, if you do see something like queen d2, just take the pawn off, and then from that point take back. If the bishop captures on c4, the knight can come back. We're chilling, right? What about this move of knight c3, though? Well, in this case, we're going to continue with b5, right? Which the purpose of this move is two-sided. First off, we're trying to defend the pawn on c4. Secondly, we're trying to attack with the move of b4. Now, bishop d2 is seen quite a bit online. I don't think it's the best option just because we can now play b4, right? Continuing to just march forward. Notice here that we're actually wiping out half of the third rank, which is something that you don't usually say in opening theory, right? I mean, if you guys watch my videos, you probably hear me say wiping out half of the blah, blah, blah rank all the time. But I mean, the third rank, this is kind of rare, right? Well, that being said, I mean, something like knight b1, at this point, the computer recommends queen takes on d5. Notice knight takes d5 here doesn't win a pawn because it loses the pawn on c4. So, okay, we take off this pawn. The bishop captures back. We take the queen, continue with a move like knight c6 and d5. And the computer gives a slight advantage to Black here, right? We have a space advantage. Our pawns are far down the board, attacking a ton of light squares, not to mention our knight on f6. Keep in mind that you're probably going to want to fianchetto your bishop on g7, especially if you see something here like b3, right? You really want to quickly fianchetto your bishop, start to look at knight e4 options, looking to attack that rook on a1, right? You want to play aggressive chess here and try to get all your pieces out as quickly as you possibly can. Okay, so that goes back to the move of b5, right? If you see something like bishop g2, you can simply play b4, queen takes on d5, and Black there with a pretty comfortable game. What about the move of a3, however? This is actually a pretty good move. And, okay, at this point, there's a couple of different options. I think the more sound option is actually e6, right? Just playing e6, trying to chip away at the center, looking at the square of b4 as well. I mean, here's the deal. If you ever see bishop d2, the rule of thumb is to drop your queen back to b6, right? If you see this move right now, drop your queen back, get the heck out of the range of fire, right? Get out of that line. But okay, I mean, here if white takes and then they play bishop d2, again, get your queen out of the line of fire. Bring your bishop out to a6 in this instance. Notice here white is trying to put a ton of pressure on c4. By the way, the computer actually likes moves against b3. It likes moves like bishop e7, knight d7, etc. Slightly more than bishop a6, but I was looking at the lines and it's just like I honestly don't understand why Stockfish likes it. I am confused, in all honesty, why Stockfish likes us to just lose a pawn. I was going through the variations, and sometimes Stockfish just does what Stockfish does. Okay, but from a human perspective, I would much rather just hold on to my pawn, and it's not like the valuation dropped hardly much at all. I mean, if you want to take, we'll just take back and we're chilling. Rook b1. Bishop takes a3 is an option, but it does get messy after pawn takes on c4. So I personally kind of like just playing queen c5. If you want to close things down, I will gladly play queen b6 and enjoy my nice space advantage with a pawn on c4. And if you take on c4, we'll just take back, right? And here black with a solid game. Going back to that move of a3, e6 is an option. What about the move of b4? Okay, now b4 is an interesting choice, and really the reason that is so interesting is because it seems as if white is in trouble. It really does, right? I mean, if white takes this pawn, we're simply winning the rook. And if white plays a move like knight e2, the evaluation actually goes in black's favor. But white can play this move of knight a2 as one of the options. Knight b1 is also good. The whole idea here is that if we push or take the pawn, white's just going to go straight back. And notice here we can't take again because we would lose our queen, and there's no cute little promotion ideas there because the knight defends. We can play something like e6, but white's just going to win our pawn on c4, right? I mean, they just have a ton of pressure on both of those pawns, so we're up a pawn, but for what good reason? Here we could play bishop b4 and actually go up some material. In fact, the line that I'm showing right now, we're going up 2 pawns, but again, for what reason, right? How many pieces of ours are not on the last rank? Only 1. How many pieces are not on the last rank for white? 1, 2. And I would honestly count this rook, even though it is on the first rank, it is very well developed. This bishop is not far off from getting involved in this game. And really, from a strategic standpoint, black is in a ton of trouble here. We have double isolated pawns on the d file, right? d6 is a glaring weakness. The next move, if white just takes this pawn, this bishop is going to be cutting down all the way to f8. Knight f5 ideas in the air. I mean, I just don't see how black's going to be surviving here very long. We're up 2 pawns, but again, for what good reason, right? So that's the idea of going back, playing b4, trying to kick white around. But all that being said, I mean, you see it in online chess all the time. White playing something like knight e2, black takes on d5, and black sometimes manages to get a good, solid position there. So that's one option that you have available. But again, I think going back, I do believe that e6 is definitely the more sound move there. See how going back to this original Hawk variation position, in which case we advanced like crazy with c4, just kind of flying away with our pawn. Well, e3 is an option, and in that case, we're going to play queen a5 with check, b5, and try to play aggressively. If white plays it correctly, they're going to be a little bit better, but black does have some decent chances there, especially in quicker time controls. What about the move of knight c3? Well, in this case, again, we're playing queen a5, right? Playing queen a5, pinning this knight to the king. If you see something like bishop d2, we can now continue by just taking the pawn off, right? And this is great for us. I mean, we're simply up a pawn now. If you want to take, we'll take back with the queen. And I think the computer has this position at just about dead even following the move of e3, but this is actually a pretty decent game for black, right? We're up a pawn, development is going to be somewhat simple, and we're just playing chess, right? Going back to that move of queen a5, bishop d2 is a mistake. What else can white try to do here? Well, a really good option that white has is playing e4, advancing in the center of the board. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, why can't we just win a pawn here? Well, we can, but white now has this move of bishop d2, and they have a huge advantage in development. By the way, though, knight takes e4. I mean, if you're playing this online, this might be the move to go with. I'm also going to be looking at this move of b5 instead as well. But knight takes e4, I mean, the thing is here is that there's only one move for white that gives them the advantage. Anything else, it's practically even, pretty much even in the evaluation, or black has the edge. Right, so okay, white only here, white only has one move, right, at the end of the day. I mean, if they want to take on c4, we'll gladly take on c3 and just break that game open, potentially checking the king, the rook, the bishop. That's great for us. And okay, if here we do see the best move, bishop d2, the reason that this is so good for white is because if we take on c3, the bishop captures back, attacking our queen, right? And if we take the bishop, white actually has this move of knight takes on d2, simply looking to play knight takes on c4 the next turn. And I mean, this line is one of the many reasons that I call the Hawk variation not very sound, right? Because if white just plays solid and they develop their pieces, it turns out we pushed our pawns too aggressively, and they're the ones with the edge in development now, right? All that being said, if we do go back to this position following knight takes d2, if we do try to play something like b5 holding on to our one pawn advantage, white now has this idea of a4, and this is just not good for us, okay? So honestly, in that kind of position, I recommend, like I said, d6, just drop the queen back and develop, right? At this point, it's not worth holding on to the pawn. It's just not, right? White here, double attacking our pawn. The moment that they take with the a pawn, our queen is going to be attacked. If we try to push here, knight takes c4 with tempo against our queen, a lot can go wrong, right? So just a warning, if you do go with that knight takes e4 line and white knows what they're doing, just give the pawn back, drop your queen, and continue to play chess, okay? Now, what other options do we have available against e4? I would say the other major one is b5, right? Just continuing to advance. Now, white here, there's a lot of different moves that are good, right? I mean, it kind of feels weird making this video because I feel like most of the lines I'm covering, it seems like white is better. But again, this is an animal opening, and a lot of animal openings aren't that great. Okay, some are though, including the hippopotamus defense. Yeah, if you follow this channel for more than 2 seconds, you know that I've made way too many videos on the hippo. But okay, back to the subject. You know, there's just a lot of options here. e5 is one of them. e5 is a move, in which case we'd probably play knight e4. You know, white there just charging down the board. Bishop d2 is also a move here. In that case, we'd probably play b4. White can actually now respond themselves with e5, right? Again, I mean, if you want to take on c3, we're not really winning a piece there because the bishop captures back, attacking our queen, and they're attacking our knight, right? And, okay, I mean, if we take on d5, white here can capture back, take on b4. And this isn't losing for black, right? Just like a lot of the other Hawk variation positions I'm showing you, none of these variations are losing for black, except for the, you know, b5, a4 variation I showed. But at the end of the day, white here, just up a ton of development. And, you know, this pawn on c4 often becomes a weakness instead of a strength, right? So that's what to do. You know, going back to that, you know, queen a5 move, if you do see something like e4 here, you can take on e4 if you want, or you can play b5, mess around with both, plug both into the computer, and see which one you like playing with the most. So now going back to this original position, we've covered the move of e3, right? In which case we're playing queen a5 with check, following b5 in a lot of those scenarios, right? Unless, of course, the queen is attacked or some other weird move by white is played. We've also seen the move of knight c3, in which case, again, we're playing that move of queen a5, right? Queen a5, a good option there. And if, you know, you see something like e4, you can either take the pawn and potentially face bishop d2, or you could just play b5, charge down the board like crazy, and hope for the best. However, I do think that the best move here for white is e4. And this, you know, this isn't the only move that gives white the edge, right? As I've said, the other lines for white can give them a better game. But I think e4 is just a simple refutation against the Hawk variation, right? It just is. You know, e4, the whole idea here is that they're attacking the pawn. On c4, if we try to play something here like b5, this is just really weakening. In fact, at that point, white can play something like e5, kicking our knight around. They can play a4, continuing to go after our very overextended pawn chain. So that's something to think about. And, okay, going back, if we take the pawn here, which is, by the way, the computer recommendation, white will now just take the pawn back, right? So we've spent all this time pushing the pawn down the board. White just takes it out in one move. We did win this pawn here, so we are sitting at even material. We drop this knight back to a square like f6. You know, sometimes a move like knight d6 could be good, but I just think it makes black's game too awkward here. So, okay, knight f6, castling kingside, d6. And here, okay, white can play something like queen e2. I mean, you know, and at the end of the day, guys, this position is salvageable for black, right? I mean, you know, you put the right player into the black, you know, the black position here, they can work something out of it. But here we're simply just down a ton of development, right? We have one piece developed. White currently has 1, 2, 3, 4, and the king castled. And this pawn on d5 is an absolute monster, strategically speaking. We just can't mess with it. right? I mean, if we ever try to play e6, we have a pawn, a bishop, and a queen locked and loaded to go. Potentially a rook on e1 as well. Our king is not even a move away from castling yet. Black here, in a lot of ways, is in some trouble, right? So going back, if you are trying to find a response against the hawk variation of c4, which you probably don't see the hawk variation that often, if we're being honest with ourselves, but okay, if you do see c4, the simple option is e4, right? Simple move. You know, e3 and knight c3, as I covered, do give white better positions if they play correctly, but it does get a little bit messy. Why not play the simple but effective line, e4? You know, queen a5 can't happen, right? Because bishop d2, and white's wondering why we moved our queen there. Queen takes d5 is no longer on the table, right? b5 here, trying to hang on to that pawn, simply overextending too far, right? Too far, too early. a4, you know, chipping away at that pawn. You know, if we take, white just captures back, they look to castle, and white is chilling there. So at the end of the day, guys, this video is not an endorsement of the hawk variation, but a public service announcement to not play the hawk variation. Again, not the worst opening I've ever seen. It's really not. But it's not great. Okay, it doesn't follow good chess principles. You know, the 4 rules of the opening: put a pawn in the center, right? And of course, there's openings that, you know, mess around with these rules a little bit, but overall, put a pawn in the center, castle, connect the rooks, and activate the rooks. We're simply trying to gain too much space too quick. We're flying away like a hawk, and it's simply not going to work. Hey guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of April in 2023. Love you guys, and it's been awesome to have you guys as part of the Patreon community. If you haven't joined the Patreon yet, there are some exclusive benefits that you gain from becoming a member. And if you're interested, I will leave a link in the description below.